The answer is yes. Yes, these prophecies that we are going to be talking about this week have already been fulfilled. Stay tuned to find out what they are. Well, good evening and welcome back to another week of Explain, another week where we engage the culture from a biblical perspective in a manner which glorifies God. My name is Troy. I am your host, and I am so thankful that you guys decided to join us for another week here on the show. Well, this week we are going to be talking about something that I think is very important. I think it's very foundational, should we say. A lot of times, we'll go around engaging the culture, but sometimes we don't have a proper lens to view the things that are going on through. And so today, I just kind of want to help you maybe form that lens a little bit. And I admit, some of the things that I'm going to be talking about today, for some of you, it might be the first time that you've been confronted with some of the stuff that I'm going to bring up. I remember what happened with me the first time that a lot of the stuff was brought up to me. But really what I'm aiming to do today is I really just kind of want to put a rock in your shoe almost. I want to put a thought in your mind, and I want you to chase that thought down, basically. And so, of course, if you are clicking on this video, you saw that the title of it is, Have These Prophecies Already Been Fulfilled? And if you watched this video from the beginning, you'll notice in the opening that I said, yes, they have. And I'm going to be talking about a perspective today by which you can view the end times, I guess you might say, called postmillennialism. Okay, now if you have been with us for any length of time, you may know that I've said, yes, I am postmillennial. That's the way that I look at the end times. That's the way that I look at the book of Revelation. There's also another word that I want you to remember, and it's two words: partial preterism. Partial preterism. Okay, so we're going to be talking about these things today. Now, oftentimes, the postmillennial movement of today gets caught up with this idea of Christian nationalism. Okay, and I've talked critically about Christian nationalism before, and I want you to know I believe that there is a way. I know that there is a way to be postmillennial without being Christian nationalist, and I know there are a lot of people who are postmillennial who also are Christian nationalists, but there also are people that don't accept the label of Christian nationalist and are postmillennial, and I would count myself among that group. You think about a guy like James White, for example. That's someone who doesn't accept the label of Christian nationalism, but is still very strongly and staunchly postmillennial. And I also want to, because like I said, some of the stuff that I'm going to say, it might throw you for a loop a little bit, okay? So what I am saying is not novel, okay? It's not like I went to the Bible and I made this up. This is a worldview or a view of the Scriptures that has been with us for a very long time in church history. You can see many prominent people throughout church history, many prominent saints throughout church history held to this perspective of postmillennialism. Some more recent names would include R.C. Sproul. R.C. Sproul, specifically when we talk about, and I want to make this clear, when we talk about partial preterism, this is something that he espoused later on in his life. James White, another good example. Like I said, that guy's postmillennial. He's really good at explaining it too. He's actually he became postmillennial a little bit later on in his life, but he is nonetheless incredibly good at explaining what he believes about it. Jeff Durbin would be another example. Okay, so that is the stream of thought that I am coming from. Okay, and like I said, this is not a novel perspective. Okay, so let's look at a couple of texts, okay? And the first thing that I want to bring to your attention is this idea of the tribulation. And you're saying, what? Wait a second. Has the tribulation already happened, this great tribulation that people are talking about? Well, if you would, go to Revelation chapter 1, verse 9. Also, it's going to be up on the screen. Remember, John is the author in the book of Revelation. He says this, I, John, your brother and partner in the tribulation and the kingdom and the patient endurance that are in Jesus, was on the island called Patmos on account of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. Okay, notice that. Notice that first line that it's so easy to skip over, right? I, John, your brother and partner in the tribulation. And you say, wait a second. So when did the tribulation happen? Had to have been when John was alive. Otherwise, he couldn't be considered a partner in the tribulation. Okay? Again, I'm just throwing these things out there. You know, I'm attempting to put a rock in your shoe. I want you to think about these things. But we have this idea that that the tribulation is looming on the horizon somewhere. But I would just impress this on you. How could the tribulation be looming on the horizon in our future when John says that he partook in the tribulation? He is a partner in the tribulation. And now, no doubt, we go through trials and tribulations, but the tribulation had to have happened while John was still on this earth, which means it is in our past, not our future, if that is the case. Okay, and there's another passage. You talk about putting rocks in your shoes, right? There's another passage in the book of Matthew 24, and a lot of people will quote from this passage when they're looking ahead to the end times. And here's the thing. I held for the majority of my life, I should say, from my childhood and some of my adult life, this idea that things were getting worse and worse and worse. That the culture around us, the world, is getting worse and worse and worse, and then someday Jesus was going to come and bail us out. He's going to bail the church out. And that was the worldview that I held for a long time. But I don't think that squares with the scriptures. Now, no doubt, a nation can get worse and worse and worse and worse and come under judgment. I mean, you see examples of this throughout all of history, where nations got worse and worse and worse and worse and more sinful and more morally degraded until God wiped them off the map, basically. And I say this sometimes, but have you met someone recently who calls themselves a Babylonian? No. Babylon was wiped off the face of the earth. The Roman Empire is basically nothing. It's basically a little city in Italy. Okay, so the Roman Empire is gone. The Third Reich, I believe the Third Reich was displeasing to God. And the Third Reich is not around anymore. Okay. And so, when people look at America and say America is under judgment and it's going to get worse and worse in America, I don't discount that argument, because I don't think that it's impossible for a nation to get worse and worse and worse and come under judgment. Okay. However, I believe that if you look at the world, zoom out at the world, look at the advancement of the gospel, there are many, many, many more Christians now than there were in the past. And that's just reality. Is there carnal Christianity in some places? Yes. Is there cultural Christianity in some places that does not save? Yes. However, there are more genuine Christians now than there were in the past as well. And if you doubt me on that, then look at the day of Pentecost, for example. When the day started with not a lot of Christians, And the day ended with more Christians, and it's advanced out from there. The gospel has advanced out from there. Okay, so I just kind of want to show you where we're tracking here. Let's keep going. Matthew 24. Okay, so people will quote Matthew 24 a lot, and they'll say, this chapter means it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse in the grand story of history. Let's look at Matthew 24, 32 through 35 first. You talk about putting a rock in your shoe. This one I know people where this passage has put a rock in their shoe. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Okay. So notice this, okay? When we read the Bible, we oftentimes want to, when we get to a passage that you might consider a problem passage, you could say, we try to not work our way around it so as to work it out of the canon or something, but we try to explain around it, okay? And don't tell me you don't do that, because people do that. That's what happens when we come to a problem passage a lot of times. People will try to explain around it or explain a reason for why it's there, and it doesn't seem to match up with the rest of their worldview. People do that. So don't tell me that you don't do that. And in some cases, that's actually a good thing. It's a good thing to think through how does the Bible square with my worldview. Sometimes you'll come away with, well, yeah, the interpretation of this passage is a little bit more complex than the interpretation of other passages. But think about how you read the rest of the Bible. How do you read the rest of the Bible? Well, you read the rest of the Bible. You read the rest of the Bible trusting what it says, and not having to, do cartwheels and try to come up with all these reasons why a certain text fits into your worldview. Okay, so I'll just ask you this. I'll just put this before you. What does this text look like it's saying? Specifically that phrase there, actually that sentence. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. For a lot of people, that's a problem passage. They have to find a way to make it fit into a certain framework. Okay? But I would submit to you to read that passage the way that you read the rest of the Bible. How do you read the rest of the Bible? Okay. Now, a little bit of context for this passage, which I think is also helpful. A lot of people, when they hear Jesus, or they hear the prophets, or they hear in Revelation, it starts talking with this apocalyptic type of language, prophetic type of language. They immediately want to, flip a switch and place whatever that passage is in the end times. Okay, and that's not always what people do, but that's what people do a lot. But I think it's helpful not to forget the context of what Jesus is doing. Jesus is actually answering a specific question from his disciples in Matthew 24. Let's look at Matthew 24, 1 through 4. Jesus left the temple and was going away, when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, "You see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." Okay, so he's talking about the destruction of the temple. And I'll just say to you, when did that happen? Most promptly after what Jesus said there. Well, the closest time that the destruction of the temple happened to Jesus's prophecy here was in AD 70, when Jerusalem was destroyed. Okay, so I think it's a little bit of a stretch to try and place Jesus's answer to his disciples in another, in another framework, as referencing another period of time further in the future, to which the disciples it wouldn't have been relevant to the disciples in a sense. It wouldn't have been as relevant to them as the events that were looming over their generation. And I think this helps us understand the passage we looked at before. Okay, this generation will not pass away until these things happen. Let's continue reading that passage. This is key. As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Here's the question they're asking him to answer, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray." And then he goes on to explain, to answer that question. Okay, they're asking him, when will we see these things? Which the most recent thing that Jesus talked about was the destruction of the temple. So I think it'd be responsible to say that they're asking him about the destruction of the temple, about these things that are imminent. And they will need to understand and see the signs leading to this, because it's in that generation that it will happen. Okay. Here's another thing, right? Because people always want to say, every time the war machine really starts, right? Every time we start to hear about wars abroad, or wars in Israel, or wars in Ukraine and Russia and stuff, we always want to start to think of this passage. You hear it all the time, Matthew 24:6-7. "And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places." Okay, you know that passage. But one thing that you might not know is there was a peace treaty that existed during Jesus' time on earth called the Pax Romana. Okay, and this peace treaty basically brought a sense of world peace to the known world at that time. And if you think through history, there has not been a time period where there has not been wars and rumors of wars. So this would have been a meaningless indicator to place in any other time frame, except the time frame that Jesus was in, where there was peace. So when you start to, it's when you start to hear, the war machine starting up again in these people's time, in the disciples' time, that's when that's when you know that the end is not yet. Okay. So that's another passage. And again, I'm just trying to put a little pebble in your shoe. I'm trying to make you think about this, that maybe some of these prophecies have already been fulfilled. Maybe they've already been fulfilled in the AD 70 fall of Jerusalem. And this is a worldview, or I should say a view of Revelation known as partial preterism, where you believe that some of the prophecies that are being spoken of in Revelation and some of these other apocalyptic type passages have already been fulfilled, and that they've been fulfilled in the AD 70 fall of Jerusalem. Okay, so let's keep going. There's a couple things that I want to say at this point. Okay, before we continue looking at Scripture, there is a view of the book of Revelation called full preterism, which is a heresy. Okay, let's just put that out there nice and clear. It's a heresy. Full preterism is the idea that you don't believe in a bodily second coming of Christ, a physical return of Christ, and you don't believe in a final judgment. Okay, these types of things. Okay, no one who is not a heretic. Anyone who is worth their stuff does not believe in full preterism. There you go. Okay, if you believe in full preterism, if you don't believe in a bodily return of Christ and a resurrection of the dead, in a final judgment, you are a heretic. Okay, that should be clear. Okay, and that is not what I am saying. I'm saying that there are some passages that have already been fulfilled quite clearly, I believe, in AD 70. However, I think that even within partial preterists, I could ask myself, how many partial preterists are there in the world? How many post-millennial partial preterists are there in this world? Well, let's say that the number, I don't know, let's say that the number is 500,000. I don't know. Okay, let's say that that's the number. Well, then that means that and this was what I would say, that means that there are probably about 500,000 different nuances of this view. Okay, you could listen to the top guys on postmillennialism. It doesn't matter if you go back in church history. It doesn't matter if if you look at people in the present day. They're going to have these little nuances that are slightly different, and it's not really even too consequential. Okay, it's not. But there are small differences. There are small differences even today. Okay, so I want to make sure that that's clear as well. Let's look at Isaiah chapter 11, verses 9 and 10. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. In that day the root of Jesse, who shall stand as a signal for the peoples, of him shall the nations inquire, and his resting place shall be glorious. Okay, so let me just ask you this. Have we ever seen a time where the earth is full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea? And I think the only answer that we really can give to that is we're getting closer and closer to that every day. As the gospel goes out, as the gospel advances, we're getting closer and closer to that every day. Okay, and so rather than placing, those passages that I was looking at in Matthew 24 in our future, where, there's this great tribulation, okay, or where there's these wars all over the place, and there's only a few Christians left when Jesus returns. I believe that the better way to look at what's in front of us is this, because we have not seen this yet. But we're getting closer and closer to the knowledge of the Lord covering the earth as the waters cover the sea. Okay? And what I will say is this. Your eschatology, meaning the way that you view the end times, impacts your worldview. Okay, now for a lot of people, it impacts their worldview differently. There are some post-millennialists that just sit back and sit on their hands because it's like, well, things are going to work out in the end. Things are going to work out in the end. Okay, and there are people from other perspectives. I was just talking to this guy. I think he said he was a dispensational premillennialist, which basically means that you do place those passages in Matthew 24. Most of those people do in the future. Okay, where the things are going to get worse and worse and worse and worse, and we got wars and rumors of wars, and we got we've got destruction everywhere, and we've got the apocalypse and the rapture and all these things happening, tribulation, bad time on the earth, and not a lot of Christians left. Okay, but what he said, I kind of just had an exchange with him the other day. I don't remember his name, but he said something to the effect of, my view of the end times doesn't motivate me to sit back. Instead, it motivates me to get out there and to preach the gospel and proclaim the gospel and to fulfill the Great Commission to go and make disciples of all the nations, right? And basically my response to him was that's great. That's great. To me, it doesn't matter as much what your view of the end times is. I think the greater question is, what is that view of the end times motivating you to do? Okay. Is your view of how things are going to play out in the end, is that causing you to basically say, well, forget about the world. I'm not worried about the world. I'm not worried about people coming to Christ. I'm not worried about making disciples of all the nations. Or is your view of what's going to happen in the future, is that motivating you to get out there today and make disciples of all the nations. And don't get me wrong, that can happen. You can be motivated to make disciples of all the nations, whether you're dispensational, premillennial, whether you're historic premillennial, whether you're amillennial, whether you're postmillennial. That doesn't matter as much as what that perspective is motivating you to do. And you can be a passive person who doesn't fulfill the Great Commission as a postmillennial, as an amillennial, as a historic premillennial, and as a dispensational premillennial. Okay, the question is, what is that motivating you to do? That's the question. The question is, what is that motivating you to do? If that is motivating you, if you can look at Isaiah 11, 9, and 10, the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea, and you can say from your heart, yes, I want that. I want that. And I'm going to participate in the Great Commission so that the knowledge of the earth the knowledge of the Lord covers the earth as the waters cover the sea, then that's the right thing. That's the right perspective to have. Okay. And really, the way that I look at things, it does impact the way that I look at the world, because I look at every square inch, like Abraham Kuyper said. I look at every square inch of the world as a place where Christ can point to and call out, "That's mine." And I believe that every square inch of the world is a square inch that can and will be won for the gospel and for the kingdom of God. And I believe that we are moving closer and closer to that day when knowledge of the Lord covers the earth as the waters cover the sea. With every day that goes by, we're getting closer and closer to that. So, have these prophecies in Revelation already been fulfilled, or have these prophecies of the end times, have they already been fulfilled? Well, I believe the answer is yes. And I believe that that can impact your worldview. I believe that that can impact the way that you look at the advance of the gospel. But I believe the most important thing is, are you committed to the cause of the gospel? Are you committed to the Great Commission? Are you committed to making disciples of all the nations? Okay? Well, I hope you guys have a great week. I hope this video blessed you, and we will see you next time.